And joining me now for another perspective is Alan Dershowitz. He's the professor emeritus at Harvard Law School, and of course he's author of a new book that he put out, Trumped Up: How the Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy. Mr. Dershowitz, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Thank you.
I want to get you to react to something that Rudy Giuliani, the president's lead attorney, said last night on Fox News. Here it is.
Even if it was for campaign purposes, if it was to save his family, to save embarrassment, it's not a campaign donation. And second, even if it was a campaign donation, the president reimbursed it fully with a payment of $35,000 a month that paid for that and other expenses.
Now, Mr. Dershowitz, I would expect you to provide me legal analysis, but this is the president's attorney trying to provide an explanation, and he's providing two different explanations. So I got to ask you, is this legal strategy that Mr. Giuliani is pursuing here, has this been well thought out over the last few days?
No, I don't think so. I think this was a very bad week for the Trump team, but it was also a very bad week for the Mueller team in light of the judge who rebuked the Mueller team for the Manafort thing. It was a very good week for Americans because we now finally have a judge who's overseeing this and who said Americans don't want to see anybody with unlimited power. But the Trump team has to speak with a single narrative. They have to get their story clearly set out. It has to be put in writing. It shouldn't be put on television shows off the cuff. This is not the way to handle a complicated case. Now, Mr. Giuliani may have a point. That is, motives are complicated. The money may have been paid for a variety of motives: to save embarrassment in the family, to help the campaign. It is a close case on whether or not there's any violation of any election laws. But if there are violations, they don't seem to be very substantial. If the president, for example, did pay and didn't report it, it's probably more likely the treasurer is in violation of the law than the president himself. So I think that, go ahead.
No. Has Mr. Giuliani actually invited more scrutiny from prosecutors, though, because of what he said? Now the prosecutors are going, well, okay, we're either going to get you for not disclosing a campaign loan, or it was, either way, they have actually violated some law. And you're right, it can be a technicality, if you want to call it that, but they're admitting to a violation here.
Well, I think they're admitting to enough that warrants scrutiny. And if you combine that with what the judge said, Judge Ellis, who said, look, this is all designed by Mueller to try to find evidence to either charge President Trump or to impeach President Trump. And they have developed tactics for trying to do that. It seems to me that the approach last week of the Trump team plays into the hands of Mueller's tactic to try at any cost to try to find technical violations against lower-ranking people so that they can be squeezed. Remember, the judge made an interesting point, kind of parroting what I've been saying on television, that the risk sometimes is that prosecutors can not only get somebody to sing, but get them to compose. And there are real dangers to civil liberties in the approach that the judge said Mueller is using. But this was a bad week for both sides. And as I said, a good week for America, because Americans get the benefit now of a judge who's prepared to look at this from an objective point of view and to express views that all experienced people know. This is the way prosecutors operate. But Giuliani knows it too, and he shouldn't be playing into their hands.
I was just going to say, I got to ask you about another thing he said having to do with James Comey. Here's what he said.
He fired Comey because Comey would not, among other things, say that he wasn't a target of the investigation. He's entitled to that. Hillary Clinton got that, and he couldn't get that. So he fired him, and he said, I'm free of this guy.
Look, I believe, and I think you've said this before in the obstruction part of this, the obstruction case is only as strong as probably the actual conspiracy case itself, and I understand that. But did Mr. Giuliani actually strengthen potentially an obstruction case against the president by declaring that rationale as representing the president on television?
Well, we now have obviously two narratives. The president himself said, both on television and in a meeting with the Russians, that he was motivated, at least in part, to end the Russian probe. I'm sure he was also motivated in part by what Comey refused to tell him. Motives are complex. motives are multifaceted. That's why motives should never form the basis of a crime. That's why it's wrong to question what a president's motives are when the president acted within his constitutional authority. We don't want to turn motives and analysis of the president's mind into criminal statutes. We have to look at what the president did, not what his motives are, because motives are always complex in both situations. The payment to Stormy Daniels and the firing of Comey, we see complex motives at work. But this can be presented much more effectively as a defense than it's been presented thus far by the Trump team.
I want to ask you actually about that in particular when it comes to the questions that Mueller wants to ask the president. You have, I think, believed that a sitting president couldn't be compelled to answer questions via subpoena about his actions while in office.
About the motives behind his actions.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
But if Mueller wants to question the president about his actions and about his motives before he's in office for everything that took place in the campaign, isn't that a much tougher subpoena for Mr. Trump's attorneys to fight?
Yes, there are three categories. There's what happened before he was president. That he can fight on Judge Ellis's ground, that it has nothing to do with the mandate that was given to the special counsel.
That's probably a high bar.
That's a high bar.
Okay.
The second is actions he took while president that are authorized by the Constitution. I think he prevails on that. And then there are actions during the campaign and the transition period, which have kind of quasi-legal protection. So there are three categories, and if they were to fight the subpoena, I think they would have a partial victory, but in the end, they would probably have to answer some questions. And I'm sure that's what they're thinking about now, because when you volunteer, at least maybe you can constrain the questions. When you're subpoenaed, a subpoena is broad, your lawyer isn't present. This is a tough decision for the president's team to make.
I'm curious, do you believe you enjoy attorney-client privilege with the president? And I asked that.
Absolutely not.
Okay, and I only asked that, have you had conversations with the president about this probe?
I have made it very clear. I've had 3 conversations with the president since he's been president, all about the Middle East, primarily because I've been advising the White House on the ongoing efforts toward a Middle East peace process.
Okay.
And every conversation I've had with the president was preceded by, don't give me any information that you think is lawyer-client. We are not in a lawyer-client relationship. Nothing you tell me is privilege by lawyer-client privilege, and I'm not going to be your lawyer. That's not the relationship I have. I am a civil libertarian who cares deeply, as the judge does, about protecting Americans from excesses of civil liberties, and that's the position I'm going to maintain.
And where are you with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks? There was a time you did some legal advisory work for them. Do you still advise WikiLeaks or Julian Assange?
No, I ended my relationship with WikiLeaks when WikiLeaks became political and started to involve itself in the campaign by leaking materials. My only contact with Assange was years ago when he was wanted in both Sweden and was worried about an indictment in the United States. So I have no current legal relationship with WikiLeaks, though I did have a relationship with Assange many, many years ago.
All right, I wanted to clear that up because I hadn't asked you about that before. But Mr. Dershowitz, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for coming on, sharing your expertise.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure, sir. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.